All right, so you will notice that the title is not changed, nor have the authors. I'm Gordon Dash. You just saw Dr. Kajiji come up and actually get the technical work done to make sure we got the right presentation open. And Bruno is here in the city, but he's currently in class, so he's not able to join us today. Bruno is one of the young African-based, well, he's actually now US-based, but his home is Cameroon. And so I do a lot of work, we both do, in Africa, mostly the southern part of Africa, where we work out of University of Cape Town, KwaZulu-Natal University, or KZN as they like to call it. And we just expanded now to Northwest. So we need to talk about Johannesburg, all right, getting involved. But this presentation will take you back to when I was about 22. I was in Chicago. At that time, I was a PhD student at the University of Colorado. And in Chicago, there was a group at the Illinois Institute of Technology that was in the process of using a mouse model to develop the Cabrini Green housing project. At 21, 22, you got to picture the time frame that we're in. And I'm watching a group of all white scientists standing around this huge board, and it was a maze, and they're watching mice run around. And my attitude then was, how can you use mice to study how to house people like me? And I had an attitude about it. Fast forward into the 1990s, I'm at the University of Rhode Island. Yeah, I'm just concluding with this semester, my 52nd year at the university. Yeah, it's been a while. I'm not going anywhere next year. We got to finish this work. But nevertheless, we had a presentation in neuroscience from a young Black neuroscientist who was at the University of Massachusetts, Boston campus. And she presented a rat model. And it was about environment, social versus independent and sparse living. And I said, it took me back in memory to the IIT days. And anyway, we got to talking, one thing led to another, and we all became joint contributors to that research. So the idea of using a rodent-based model and translating what we learned from rodents into a decision model about humans and the allocation of humans that are applying for apartments in urban areas, which tend to be not dominated, but certainly populated by high-rise, high-density structures. I grew up in one as a child. Those of you who know New York City, you may know Polo Grounds. Well, Polo Grounds, there's the Polo Grounds project, which was the Polo Grounds Stadium when I lived there. And right next door was the Colonial Park houses, the smaller set of projects where I grew up and went to school, brand new elementary school, Eugene Percy Roberts School, PS 156. Every school in New York has an attached playground. So PS 156 playground is better known today as the Rutgers, is that Rutgers? Not Rutgers. Now I'm thrown off. Right? That's what I mean. That's quite all right. It'll come to me. But we didn't have all the big basketball games in the city. All right, but it'll come to me in a minute. And so you can see that I've been influenced by being a New Yorker, growing up in projects, encountering along the way, and doing a doctoral degree in operational research and finance. So that's how this all ties together. All right, so looking at this, what was our research question? Is it possible to achieve an equilibrium state of prosocial behavior in public housing? And so one of the things I would ask my class is how many students, how many of you have driven through New York and seen projects? So if they're driving to New York, they definitely see Co-op City. And to them, they will never go into Co-op City, but that's a project. And so their opinion, and we're talking about mostly white students at this point at the University of Rhode Island, is that it's a dangerous place. And it's characterized by antisocial behavior as opposed to prosocial behavior. So how can we blend the mix of individuals, families, and individuals that live in a housing complex so that it would encourage prosocial as opposed to antisocial behavior? Well, this is where the RAT model comes into play. And so you can see it discussed, and then notice that there's one point that we make here, and that is about the social indicator score. And here, excuse me, in this part of the study, That's where we use our findings from examining the rat brains that we extracted in order to develop a score that gives us a clue on whether a person will behave in a prosocial or antisocial behavior. Then the next question is, how do you decide to combine them in some collective in the housing, where you may have over 1 million units in a city like New York? So this is how we proceeded. We made some assumptions about how individuals, as well as the rats, live. And so we were concerned about behavioral differentiation, safe and unsafe choices that the brain may make, whether it's the rat brain or the human brain. And then, of course, how do we combine this all the way up through health issues? All right, so again, we're focusing on housing and reconstruction of housing. Here you can see a picture from Cabrini Green in Chicago, which was so dangerous that even I didn't want to go in to the project grounds itself. Of course, it's been torn down because they couldn't clean it up. So that all that was left was to tear it down and start over again. But start over and do what? All right, so we brought this to a different level. And let me just say that we're not the first to do this. These rat studies for understanding housing go back to the late 1950s, a fellow named Calhoun, who first used mice. The problem with mice, they're smaller, they get bored, and they're sort of hard to get the mouse to do what you want it to do. On the finance side, we've actually used mice to trade in financial markets, and they do very well in prediction. So prediction models are, the big thing in machine learning and use of neural networks today. The mouse can rival the neural network, but the mouse gets bored, it gets tired, and so you can't use it in a live setting that way. So the neural networks still win. But nevertheless, our goal is to find across multi-unit, multi-location sites, this optimal level of prosocial behavior by having applicants fill out a form that's been enhanced now to capture these cognitive influences that we're after. But which cognitive influences? That's what we'll learn from the rats. So that when we apply this to a mathematical optimization model, boom, we get an assignment of individuals by floor, by location, that will hopefully move us to a more prosocial way of behaving for the units. Okay, so our animal experiment is somewhat described here. I will leave this to 2 readings, one that we published in the Journal of Neuroscience, where you can actually get into the science of this. Let me say that I also teach in neuroscience, neuroethics, but I don't call myself a true neuroscientist. I wasn't trained in that area. I've just been fortunate through colleagues and now our daughter to get involved in this area. But when you take a look at this, you can see that what we did is that we split the rats into 2 dimensions, low anxiety and high anxiety rats. How do you do that? Well, it takes about 4 generations. We breed them. That's about 1 year of breeding. And so we have 2 sets of rats, those that you would not want to touch, high anxiety, and those that are cool. They're just sort of melt. And those are the low anxiety rats. Of course, we separate them by sex. There is no gender in the animal world, only sex. So we separate them by sex. And then we go to work to study the 7 regions of the rat brain. So these rats are put into 2 different social environments. One has a lot of toys, a lot of activity, and the other is sparse, and there's nothing to do. We give them an elevated maze to see what happens when they go up. I should also mention that half of these rats in both dimensions were drug addicted. And the other was marked. Let's be real. And so, then how do we study their cognitive decisions? That requires terminating the rat. We extract the brain, the microsection of the brain, and we study the CFOS protein. And so the movement of the CFOS protein gives us insight into how the rats react to their different environments. So what are we looking to study? You can see this on the far side. We want to know whether they will flee or fight. All right, we want to understand their reaction to threats sensitivity. You can see the different parts of the brain that we study to glean this information. The amygdala, for example, right at the top, stress processing down in PAG. You can see CG1 and CG2, social decision-making, and then reward and aversion processing. well, these are characteristics of the way you make decisions. But we can't, terminate you, extract your brain microseconds. We might be able to put a cap on today and read some digital signals. But nevertheless, this study was done about 10 years ago. This was state of the art. I should mention, since we're about into AI, part of our goal is to redesign this experiment. It will be used in your country of South Africa. So we're negotiating, and we hope to attend at the end of June, the South African Neuroscience Convention that will be there. And this is about building social communities in South Africa. And sweat as a community be made more pro-social as opposed to anti-social. So those questions exist in the global community, as well as right here in New York and other urban areas. All right, so after extracting this information from the brains, we then subjected to statistical analysis. Today we heard a beautiful presentation where exploratory and confirmatory factor analysis is mentioned. Here's our application of exploratory factor analysis. What dimensions can we find? So the question, is it possible to identify neurobehavioral factors underlying the complex interrelationships among CFOS levels in the 7 regions of the brain? And there it is. So this is the first clear indication from the statistical analysis that we can isolate as you see the 4 dimensions. I won't bother to read them. You can read them yourself. But look at that. Each one has a fear concept associated with it. But then we see reward, we see anxiety, drug and stress tends to load on its own factor. So we know that those rats that are drug induced behave a little differently than those that are not. And then, of course, how do individual rats escape? We would tell our kids, don't hang out with that group, find a different friend circle. That's all a form of escape. And we see it happen as well in the rats. Not mentioned in this, and again, I won't read all of that too, but not mentioned in this is some of the results from the elevated maze. The elevated maze, from the neuroscience point of view, is not looked at the way I want to see it, coming from the projects. To me, the projects elevated means I'm going to the top floor. So 2 years ago, we were here, maybe it was last year, 2 years ago. And I left the conference. I hadn't been back to my neighborhood in over 50 years. I got on the D train, went up to 155th Street, and my heart was like, hell, I'm going to the ghetto. And I walked out, and if you ever get off on the D train 155th, right in front of you is Rucker Park. I couldn't think of the name, but Rucker Park, they have all the big time basketball games and competition. And of course, a building, which was where I went to elementary school. Now it's something else. And as I walked into the projects, the first thing that struck me, I'm like, the place is spotless. It's clean. And I walked over to my building, and see guys come out with do-rags on, talking stuff. And of course, I'm the stranger. So I start talking to them. Next thing you know, it's like park. We sitting around like, we've been friends for years and just enjoying ourselves. And I'm like, this is community. And really felt strongly about what happened in that regard. But I'm thinking in the back of my mind about these findings about fear. I had concern, stress walking in because I thought I was going into an environment that would be dangerous, and it turned out not to be. All right, but anyway, you can obviously get a copy of these slides. This again continues, but through the study of Manover, the different regions of the brain. And so it allows us to document that, in fact, we can find these regions. There's a new paper on the way. It should be out week, 2 weeks, where you can see this augmented through the use of a radio basic functioning artificial neural network. And that's a really nice application because you see the Manover, but extended into the complex world, nonlinear world of the neural network. All right, but let's move on. And here we can see some of the preliminary output from the neural network. We were talking and certainly had a great discussion about AI in the classroom. I am a leader in AI in the classroom. Our textbook, we've rewritten, extended it by about 5 different chapters. And so in every chapter on the use of financial derivatives, options contracts, futures contracts, swap contracts, every chapter now has an AI application. We work mostly with predictive AI. What's our advantage? Our advantage is that Dr. Kajiji controls her own AI software. So we can attach that to the book, and it gives us a competitive advantage, and certainly the student a competitive advantage. But I'm also willing to share with you, because as I mentioned in my earlier comment, I'm shocked when the students are doing their presentations how much better they were this year than any prior year. So fortunately, we had a snow event which forced us to be online. So it was done by Zoom, so I recorded it. And then I created an anonymized version so you can actually hear the students talk about how to interpret the weights generated by the neural network as they explain their prediction models. They have to predict the next day return for their chosen stock in the class. But here we're doing the same, but for the rat. Okay, and so it goes on. Let me move on so you can see the real emphasis in this. All right, so the real goal, and what we want to tell the mayor, the new mayor, we probably have an opportunity to talk to this person and his administration where we couldn't in prior years because of the fear. Of course, we hide that behind professional concerns about having, rats and AI, and now you're going to attach this to how we assign individuals to apartments in the city. Didn't fly. I had one advantage in that the city manager out in St. Louis was my roommate back in college days in the 60s. So I had an in with St. Louis. We got to debug and try some of this through my good friend Richard out there. But here we can see we begin to formalize from a decision-making, a translational point of view, the factors that we found in the rat. So what we then suggest in this paper is that we develop a questionnaire. Let's attach it to the standard form and questionnaire that's provided by the New York City Housing Authority. So when you are a family or an individual who wishes to gain an apartment, you fill it out, but then you have a couple more pages now that you have to fill out. So then we use AI to help develop questions that attack these different dimensions that you see mentioned here so that we can score the person in terms of their ability to contribute to prosocial outcomes in the assignment. So this brings us, this is the process of making application. And you can see that the prosocial score is mentioned, ranges between 0 and 100. So a prosocial score, for example, of a social indicator score, greater than 80, that's a really prosocial person. A moderate one would have a score between 60 and 80, and so on. Okay, so what do you do when you have that? All right, this, believe it or not, is notation that I borrowed from my dissertation. So back in the 70s, what did I do to get out of the University of Colorado? I developed a nonlinear goal programming optimization algorithm, and that's what this is. All right, but what we're going to do is use this nonlinear goal programming algorithm. Mine is good. The Germans have a great one today, but I'm still good. All right? Although I might go to the Ruby if I was in a much larger problem. But nevertheless, what this says is that we can have multiple objectives, right? So when you do housing, you have objectives. For example, we know that female drug-addicted rats with pups like to live up. We also know this, that social service providers won't go up because they're afraid. They're not getting in the elevator, they're not going up. And because the adult is drug addicted, they don't like to come down and forage for food. They send the adolescents down. Those adolescents become unsupervised and the delinquents of the neighborhood. So let's translate that into human behavior. And we suggest that if you have a family that's female head household with young teenagers, you don't assign them to the 20th floor, put them on the second floor or below, because they can get help. They may not want to be there, but we're, again, setting an objective, which may or may not be met, to create a prosocial way of behavior in the housing complex as a whole. Well, this is the mathematical characterization of the model. And embedded in that model is what all operational research students learn from their senior year and beyond, and that's the assignment problem. It's studied in many ways, traveling salesman problem, but generally, how do you assign individuals to a task so that every task is covered? It's a balanced problem when everything works out. It's an unbalanced problem when not every task can be covered by the available individuals That would be one characterization. So we use the traditional assignment model inside the multi-objective goal programming model to generate a solution. So this is the mathematical statement that you would see for assignment. It's embedded inside the multi-objective problem. And then we generate results. Here you see uniform case. Every assignment was accomplished. So we can say that the goals of getting people assigned to apartments, no matter what their social indicator score, occurred across different buildings. So this model accounts for the behavior of the building as well as the behavior of the individual. We want to diversify the assignment of individuals so that we have a tendency to pull people towards pro-social behavior. But what happens in the non-uniform case, which is more realistic than uniform? And so here, we're likely to have some goals that are unmet. But then that becomes a time problem. And so these problems are nice to talk about in a static environment because I can do it the whole time constantly. And but over time is when you begin to work out the inconsistencies in the performance of the model. So you don't expect perfection first time you implement the model, but thank you. But over time, you can work it out. All right, so the other thing it does is it allows us to deal with spatial allocation in the city. Different buildings spread across different miles and objectives. So what are our contributions in conclusion? We can definitely do a behavioral extension to assignment models. We can translate from rodent behavior to human behavior. We can stay consistent with policy. So here you see several federal policies that are identified. Those are, of course, incorporated into the model. And we have now contributed a evolving but a standardized questionnaire that captures in a realistic way the objectives that are being held by those we elect to run our city, tax us, and hopefully create a better living. Thank you.